when notorious outlaw Cassian DeWitt saves Eliza Monroe from a stagecoach ambush, her life of privilege unravels. But as passion sparks and old secrets surface, whose side will she choose? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The setting sun painted the desert sky in shades of orange and purple as the stagecoach rumbled along the dusty trail to Hollow Creek. Inside, Eliza Monroe dabbed her forehead with a lace handkerchief, trying to ignore the oppressive heat. At 26, she had the kind of beauty that turned heads, honey blonde hair neatly pinned beneath her hat, green eyes that sparkled with intelligence, and fair skin that she desperately tried to keep from freckling in the harsh western sun. "Not much longer now, Miss Monroe," said Mr. Jenkins, a traveling salesman who'd been trying to impress her for the last 50 miles. "Your father must be eager to have you home." Eliza smiled politely. "Yes, I'm sure he is." After 3 months visiting her aunt in Santa Fe, she was ready to return to the familiar comforts of Hollow Creek, to her father's bank, to her fiancé, Dr. Thomas Blake, and to the life that had been carefully planned for her since birth. For key. Stagecoach suddenly jerked to a stop, throwing Eliza forward. She grabbed the leather strap to steady herself. What in tarnation? Mr. Jenkins peered out the window. The driver's voice called out, shaky and urgent. "Folks, we got trouble." Eliza's heart began to pound. She'd heard stories of stagecoach robberies, of course, but such things didn't happen on routes to respectable towns like Hollow Creek. Then she heard them. Hoofbeats circling the coach, followed by rough laughter. "Come out nice and easy," slurred voice commanded, "and bring everything valuable with you." The elderly couple across from Eliza exchanged terrified glances. Mr. Jenkins went pale. "Do as they say," the driver called again. "There." A gunshot cracked through the air. Eliza gasped as she heard a heavy thud, the sound of the driver's body hitting the ground. "Jesus, Mary and Joseph," whispered the elderly woman, clutching her husband's arm. Mr. Jenkins was the first to move. He flung open the door and practically fell out of the coach. "Don't shoot, I'm coming out." The elderly couple followed, trembling as they descended. Eliza remained frozen in her seat, clutching her satchel to her chest. Inside was not only her mother's jewelry, but also important bank documents her father had asked her to transport from the Santa Fe branch. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the bag tighter. "What about you, sweetheart?" A bearded face appeared, in the doorway hidden behind a dirty bandana. His eyes were bloodshot, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Don't be shy now." Eliza pressed herself against the far side of the coach, her throat too dry to scream. "Well, look what we got here, boys," the man called to his companions. "A real lady. Mighty fine clothes you're wearing, miss, mighty fine indeed." 3 more masked men appeared behind him, their eyes roving over her with undisguised hunger. Eliza felt sick. "Hand over that bag and we'll be gentle," the first man said, reaching for her. Eliza clutched her satchel tighter. "No." The man's eyebrows shot up in surprise, then narrowed dangerously. "No? Listen here, you stuck up." A shot rang out from somewhere above them, sharp and clear, not like the drunken shot that had killed the driver. The bearded man's words died in his throat as blood bloomed across his chest. He toppled backward, dead before he hit the ground. The other bandits whirled around, guns drawn, looking wildly in all directions. Another shot, another man fell. "It's him!" one of the remaining robbers shouted, panic in his voice. "It's DeWitt!" The name sent a chill down Eliza's spine. Cassian DeWitt. Even in Santa Fe they whispered about him. The railroad baron's son turned outlaw. Some said he'd killed 30 men. Some said more. 2 more shots in quick succession, and the remaining bandits collapsed in the dust. Then silence. Eliza remained perfectly still, afraid to breathe. Outside she could hear the whimpers of the other passengers, huddled behind the coach. The sound of a single horse approaching made her pulse quicken. Slow, confident hoofbeats. Not running, not afraid. A shadow fell across the doorway of the coach. And there he was. Cassian DeWitt didn't look like a killer at first glance. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face might have been handsome, if not for the scar that ran along his jaw and the coldness in his blue eyes. He wore a black duster coat despite the heat, and on his hip gleamed a silver revolver. Those eyes found Eliza, and something in them changed, surprised perhaps at finding her alone and unharmed. "You didn't run," he said, his voice deeper than she expected. Eliza lifted her chin. There was nowhere to go. A half smile touched his lips, gone almost before she saw it. "Smart girl?" His gaze dropped to the satchel in her white-knuckled grip. "That must be valuable." "It's not gold," she said quickly. "Just papers and some family jewelry." Cassian nodded thoughtfully, then glanced over his shoulder at the bodies in the dust. "Those men would have taken more than your valuables, Miss Monroe," she said, surprising herself by answering. "Eliza Monroe." Something flickered in his eyes. "Monroe? Any relation to Bartholomew Monroe of the Hollow Creek Bank?" "He's my father." Cassian's expression hardened. "Interesting." He looked at her for a long moment, then made a decision. He extended his hand into the coach. "If you're going to stay alive out here, you'll need better company." Eliza stared at his outstretched hand. She should refuse. She should join the other passengers. Wait for help. Return to Hollow Creek, to her father, to Thomas, to safety. But when she looked into Cassian DeWitt's eyes, she didn't see a killer. She saw something else, something that called to a part of herself she'd kept buried for 26 years. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm as he helped her from the coach. Behind them, the other passengers watched in horror. "Miss Monroe," Mr. Jenkins called out. "What are you doing? That's Cassian DeWitt." Cassian led her to his horse, a magnificent black stallion that stood apart from the dead men's mounts. "You're making a mistake," Mr. Jenkins shouted. "Think of your father. Think of Dr. Blake." At the mention of her fiancé, Eliza hesitated. Thomas Blake was a good man, respectable, safe. Everything Cassian DeWitt was not. Having second thoughts, Cassian asked quietly. Eliza looked back at the stagecoach, at the path that led to Hollow Creek and the life that waited for her there. A good life, a proper life, a life where she'd never felt truly alive. "No," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I'm not." With one fluid motion, Cassian lifted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. His chest was solid against her back, his arms encircling her as he took the reins. "Miss Monroe!" Mr. Jenkins made one last desperate plea. "He's an outlaw, a murderer!" Cassian's voice was low in her ear. "Ready?" Eliza didn't look back again. "Yes." They rode away from the stagecoach, leaving the dead bandits and Eliza's old life in the dust behind them. The desert wind whipped at her carefully pinned hair until it came loose, streaming behind her like a golden flag. For the first time in her life, Eliza Monroe didn't care about appearances. They rode until night fell completely, the desert transformed in the silver moonlight. Eliza had never been out after dark like this, never felt the cool night air on her face, or seen so many stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Eventually, Cassian guided his horse into a narrow canyon, following a path that Eliza would have missed entirely. The walls rose high on either side, hiding them from any pursuers. "We'll camp here," he said, bringing the horse to a stop beside a small spring. He dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. Eliza's legs trembled as her feet touched the ground, partly from the long ride, partly from the reality of what she'd done finally sinking in. She'd run away with Cassian DeWitt, an outlaw, a man wanted in 3 territories. "Having regrets?" he asked, watching her face in the moonlight. "No," she said, but her voice wavered. Cassian busied himself making a small fire, his movements efficient and practiced. When the flames cast a warm glow around their little camp, he gestured for her to sit on a flat rock near the fire. "You should eat something." He offered her jerky and dried fruit from his saddlebag. Eliza accepted it, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. They ate in silence for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. "Why did you come with me?" he finally asked. Eliza considered the question. "I don't know." "Not a very good answer, Miss Monroe." "Why did you ask?" "For me to come," she countered. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Touché." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Maybe I was curious about what kind of woman sits calmly in a stagecoach, surrounded by killers, refusing to give up her satchel. They weren't very intimidating killers, she said. Not compared to you. His smile faded. Is that what you think? I am? A killer? Isn't it what everyone says you are? Cassian stared into the fire. I've killed men, I won't deny that, but only men who deserved it. Like those bandits today. They shot the driver in cold blood. They would have hurt you. His voice hardened. Yes, they deserved it. Eliza couldn't argue with that. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving my life. He looked surprised by her gratitude, as if he wasn't used to hearing those words. You're welcome. Silence fell between them again, but it was more comfortable now. You should sleep, he said eventually. We have a long ride tomorrow. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, somewhere your father's name won't reach. Eliza frowned. What do you have against my father? Cassian's face darkened. That's a conversation for another day. He stood and retrieved a blanket from his saddlebag, offering it to her. Rest, I'll keep watch. Eliza wanted to press the issue, but exhaustion was overtaking her. She accepted the blanket and found a relatively soft patch of ground near the fire. As she settled down, she noticed Cassian staring at her with an unreadable expression. What is it? She asked. You're not what I expected, Eliza Monroe. What did you expect? A spoiled banker's daughter who'd be crying for her daddy by now. His tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. Eliza pulled the blanket around her shoulders. Maybe I'm not who everyone thinks I am. Maybe not. He turned away, moving to sit on a rock at the edge of their camp, his silver gun gleaming at his hip. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be harder. Eliza closed her eyes, the events of the day swirling in her mind. She should be terrified. She should be planning her escape. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. She felt... Free words spread fast in Hollow Creek. Bartholomew Monroe slammed his fist on his desk, his face purple with rage. What do you mean she left with him willingly? Mr. Jenkins, still dusty from the road, wrung his hat in his hands. I'm sorry, sir, I tried to stop her. We all did. But she took his hand and got on his horse without a fight. Impossible. Monroe's voice thundered through the bank office. My daughter would never... She did, sir, Jenkins insisted. I saw it with my own eyes. Thomas Blake sat in the corner, his handsome face ashen. At 32, he was the most respected doctor in 3 counties and had been engaged to Eliza for nearly a year. There must be some mistake, he said. Eliza must have been coerced, threatened. She didn't look threatened, Jenkins said. She looked... He hesitated. She looked what? Monroe demanded. Determined, sir. Like she'd made up her mind. Monroe collapsed into his chair, the fight suddenly gone out of him. Cassian DeWitt, he muttered. Of all the outlaws in the territory, it had to be him. Thomas leaned forward. What does it matter? Which outlaw took her? We need to get her back. Monroe and Jenkins exchanged a look that Thomas couldn't interpret. What aren't you telling me? The doctor demanded. Monroe sighed heavily. DeWitt has a history with our town. With me. What kind of history? His father owned the railroad before certain investments went bad. Monroe wouldn't meet Thomas's eyes. The DeWitts lost everything. His father killed himself. His mother died of grief. His younger brother was killed in a fight over their land. And what does this have to do with Eliza? Thomas asked. Cassian blames me and others for his family's downfall. He's been raiding banks and trains across the territory for years, but he's never touched Hollow Creek. Monroe's face darkened. Until now. You think he took Eliza for revenge? Thomas stood up, his hands balled into fists. We have to go after them. And we will, Monroe said firmly. I'm calling in every favor I have. By tomorrow there will be a bounty on DeWitt's head so large that every gun for hire in the territory will be looking for him. His eyes were cold. And if he's touched a hair on my daughter's head, I'll see him hang myself. Morning came too quickly. Eliza woke to the smell of coffee and opened her eyes to find Cassian crouched by a small fire, pouring the dark liquid into a tin cup. You're awake, he said, offering her the cup. Drink. We need to move soon. Eliza sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. Her dress was wrinkled beyond repair, her hair a tangled mess. She'd never been seen in such a state before. Strangely, she didn't care. She accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you." As she sipped the strong brew, she studied Cassian in the morning light. He looked tired but alert, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The silver gun never left his hip. "Why did you save me yesterday?" she asked suddenly. "You could have just killed those men and ridden away." Cassian paused in packing up their small camp. "Would you have preferred that?" "No, I'm just trying to understand," he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I told you, I only kill men who deserve it. I try to help those who need it." He gave her a pointed look. "You needed it." "And now? Why am I here with you instead of on my way to Hollow Creek?" Cassian's jaw tightened. "You know who your father is. You know what he does." "He's a banker," Eliza said defensively, "a respected businessman." Cassian's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you think?" He shook his head. "Your father and men like him stole everything from my family. They manipulated stock prices, called in loans without warning, drove honest people to ruin for their own profit." Eliza frowned. "That can't be true. My father built that railroad with his own hands. When your father's consortium wanted it, they didn't offer to buy it. They destroyed him, drove him to suicide." Cassian's eyes burned with old pain. "My mother died of a broken heart 6 months later. My brother tried to defend what little land we had left and was shot for his trouble." Eliza felt cold despite the morning sun. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. Men like your father keep their hands clean while others do their dirty work." He finished packing and stood up straight. "I took you because I saw something in you, something different from your father. Was I wrong?" Eliza thought of her life, in Hollow Creek, of her father's cold ambition, of Thomas's carefully planned future for them both, of the suffocating politeness that had ruled her every move. "No," she said finally, "you weren't wrong." Relief flickered across his face, so brief she almost missed it. "Good, because we need to ride hard today. By now your father knows you're with me. He'll have every gun in the territory looking for us." The thought should have frightened her. Instead, Eliza felt a thrill run through her veins. "Then we'd better not get caught." Cassian's eyes widened slightly, then that half-smile appeared again. "No, Miss Monroe, we'd better not." He helped her onto his horse once more, and as they rode out of the canyon into the rising sun, Eliza felt something shift inside her. The proper banker's daughter was fading with every mile, and someone new was taking her place. Someone wild and free and unafraid, someone she'd always wanted to be. The sun beat down mercilessly as Cassian and Eliza rode across the open desert. After 3 days together, Eliza barely recognized herself. Her once pristine dress was now torn and dusty. Her fair skin had turned pink despite the bandana Cassian had given her to shield her face. Her hands, once soft and unblemished, were rough from gripping the saddle, and yet she'd never felt more alive. "We're almost there," Cassian said, his voice close to her ear as they rode double on his horse. "See that ridge up ahead, just beyond. It is a place where we can rest properly." Eliza nodded, too exhausted for words. They'd been riding since dawn, stopping only briefly to water the horse and eat a quick meal of jerky and dried fruit. "You're doing well," he added, surprising her with the compliment. "Most fine ladies would have collapsed by now." "I'm not most." "Ladies," she replied, a hint of pride in her voice. She felt rather than heard his chuckle a rumble against her back. "No, Miss Monroe, you certainly are not." As they crested the ridge, a small valley opened up before them. Nestled against the far cliffs was a modest cabin with a corral for horses and a small garden plot beside it. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting someone was home. Eliza tensed. "Who lives there?" "Friends," Cassian said simply. "People I trust." He guided his horse down the slope toward the cabin. As they approached, the door opened and a woman stepped out, rifle in hand. She was in her 50s, with steel-gray hair and a face weathered by the sun and hard living. Behind her appeared a man of similar age, tall and lean with a thick mustache and kind eyes. "Cassian DeWitt," the woman called out, lowering her rifle. Been a while since you darkened our door." "Hello, Martha," Cassian replied, a genuine smile warming his face. "Frank, hope you don't mind some company." Martha's eyes shifted to Eliza, narrowing with curiosity. "And who might this be?" Cassian dismounted, then helped Eliza down. Her legs trembled beneath her, unaccustomed to so many hours in the saddle. "This is Eliza," he said, his hand lingering at her waist to steady her. "She's a friend who needed help." Martha's eyebrows shot up. "A friend, is it? Well, any friend of Cassian's is welcome here." She gestured toward the cabin. "Come on in, girl. You look like you could use a wash and a hot meal." Frank stepped forward to take the horse. "I'll see to your mount, Cass. You two go on inside." Eliza followed Martha into the cabin, acutely aware of how she must look and smell after days on the trail. The interior was simple but clean, with a large stone fireplace, a wooden table with chairs, and doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. "Bathrooms through there," Martha said, pointing to a small door. "Got a pump for water and soap, not fancy, but it'll get the trail dust off. I'll find you some clean clothes." "Thank you," Eliza said sincerely. "That's very kind." Martha studied her for a moment. "You got a last name, girl?" Eliza hesitated, glancing at Cassian, who had followed them inside. "It's better if you don't know," he said to Martha. The older woman nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Trouble follows you like a shadow, Cassian DeWitt. Always has." She turned back to Eliza. "Well, whoever you are, you get yourself cleaned. Up. Dinner will be ready soon." When Martha left to find clothes, Cassian stepped closer to Eliza. "You can trust them," he said quietly. "Frank and Martha took me in after my family died. They're good people." Eliza nodded. "Thank you for bringing me here." His blue eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Get some rest. We have things to discuss later." The hot water felt like heaven against Eliza's skin. She scrubbed away days of dust and sweat, savoring the simple pleasure of being clean again. The clothes Martha provided were plain but comfortable, a cotton shirt, a long skirt, and a shawl for the cool evening ahead. As she dried her hair by the fire, the smell of stew cooking made her stomach growl. Frank and Cassian had returned from the barn and were seated at the table, deep in conversation that stopped when she approached. "Feel better?" Martha asked, ladling stew into bowls. "Much, thank you." Eliza sat in the chair Cassian pulled out for her. Dinner was a quiet affair at first, everyone focused on the hearty stew and fresh bread. But as the meal progressed, Frank began asking questions. "Papers say you robbed the Santa Fe Express last month," he said to Cassian. "That true?" Cassian nodded, breaking off a piece of bread. "They were moving gold for the eastern banks. Blood money taken from small ranchers forced off their land. And the guard who got shot," Frank pressed. "Wasn't me," Cassian said firmly. "I don't shoot innocent men doing their jobs." One of the guards panicked, fired at Shadows. His own partner caught the bullet. Frank nodded, seemingly satisfied. "And now," he glanced meaningfully at Eliza. Cassian set down his spoon. "Now I've got every gun in the territory looking for me, with a new reason to shoot first and ask questions never." Eliza looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Martha pushed a newspaper across the table. "You're famous, girl." The headline made Eliza's blood run cold. "Banker's daughter abducted by notorious outlaw." Below was a sketch of her face beside one of Cassian, looking far more menacing than he did in person. "My father," she whispered, scanning the article. According to the paper, she had been violently taken from the stagecoach by Cassian DeWitt, who had murdered 4 men before forcing the innocent young woman onto his horse at gunpoint. Further down, she found a quote from Thomas. "My fiancée would never willingly accompany such a villain. I fear for her safety and virtue. A substantial reward is offered for her safe return and DeWitt's capture, dead or alive." $10,000, Frank whistled. "That's a lot of money for your head, Cass. And $5,000 for the safe return. Of Miss Eliza Monroe, daughter of Bartholomew Monroe, president of the Hollow Creek Bank," Martha added, watching Eliza's reaction carefully. Eliza's hands trembled as she set down the paper. "This is all lies. I went with him willingly." "Would your father or your fiancé believe that?" Martha asked gently. "No," Eliza admitted. "They'd say I was confused or coerced. Or that you've been corrupted, Cassian added bitterly. The innocent banker's daughter, led astray by the wicked outlaw. Eliza met his gaze across the table. Is that what you think, that you've corrupted me? Something flickered in his eyes, concern perhaps, or guilt. Haven't I? Look at you, Eliza. 3 days ago you were headed home to marry a respectable doctor. Now you're a fugitive, eating dinner with an outlaw while your face is plastered. On wanted posters across the territory. I made my choice, she said firmly. No one forced me. Cassian held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. We'll leave tomorrow. It's not safe for you to stay with me now. Leave. Eliza's heart sank. Where am I supposed to go? I know people in Colorado, he said. Good people who can give you a fresh start, away from your father's name and mine. And what about you? His face hardened. I've got unfinished business to attend to. With my father, she guessed. Cassian didn't deny it. Your father and men like him have been stealing from honest folks for years. Someone needs to stop them. And that someone is you, she challenged. If not me, then who? He shot back. Martha cleared her throat. Perhaps this conversation can wait until morning. You both need rest. Frank nodded in agreement. Martha's right. Eliza, you can take the spare room. Cassian, you know where the extra blankets are for the floor. As they cleared the table, Eliza tried to process everything. The entire territory thought she'd been kidnapped. Her father and Thomas were offering rewards for her rescue, and tomorrow Cassian planned to send her away. The thought made her chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain. Later that night, unable to sleep, Eliza slipped outside. The desert air was cool, the sky ablaze with stars. She wrapped Martha's shawl tighter around her shoulders and sat on the porch steps. Couldn't sleep? Cassian's voice came from the shadows. She wasn't. Surprised to find him there, keeping watch despite the relative safety of the cabin. Too much on my mind. He emerged from the darkness to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, but not so close as to touch. Second thoughts, he asked. About coming with you? No. She gazed up at the stars. About what? Happens next, yes. Cassian followed her gaze upward. I never meant to involve you in my fight, Eliza. Maybe I want to be involved. She turned to look at him. My whole life I've done what was expected of me. The proper daughter, the perfect fiancée. I never questioned anything until what? Until I met you, she admitted softly. Until I saw another way to live. He shook his head. My way. Serve living isn't for someone like you. Someone like me, she repeated. You mean someone weak, someone who needs to be protected. That's not what I meant. Then teach me, she said suddenly. Teach me to protect myself, to survive out here. Cassian looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. You're serious. Completely. She met his gaze without flinching. I don't want to be sent away like some fragile doll that might break. I want to stand on my own 2 feet. A slow smile spread across his face, not the half-smile she was used to, but something genuine that transformed his features. All right, Miss Monroe. Lesson 1 starts tomorrow. True to his word, Cassian began Eliza's education the next morning. Frank had an old revolver he was willing to part with, smaller than Cassian's silver gun, but deadly enough in the right hands. This isn't a toy, Cassian told her as they stood behind the cabin, empty cans set up on a fallen log 50 feet away. It's a tool, and like any tool, it requires respect and skill. He showed her how to load it, how to hold it, how to aim. Breathe in, he instructed, standing close behind her, his arms guiding hers into position. Then halfway out, squeeze the trigger. Don't pull it. Eliza tried to focus on the target and not on the warmth of his chest against her back or the strength in his hands as they steadied hers. Her first shot went wide, missing the cans entirely. Again, he said, not unkindly. Nobody gets it right the first time. By midday, she'd hit 3 cans, and the satisfaction was unlike anything she'd felt before. Not bad, Cassian said, a hint of pride in his voice. Not bad at all. Martha came out with sandwiches for lunch, watching with amusement as Eliza practiced her stance without the gun. Never thought I'd see the day Cassian DeWitt taught a society girl to shoot, she remarked. I'm a quick learner. Eliza replied. So I see. Martha handed her a sandwich. And what exactly are you planning to do with these new skills, if you don't mind my asking? Eliza hesitated. I'm not sure yet. She's not doing anything, Cassian interjected, joining them. She's still leaving for Colorado tomorrow. Am I? Eliza challenged. Before he could respond, Frank came running from the front of the property, rifle in hand. Riders coming, he shouted. 6 of them, armed. Cassian's hand went instantly to his silver gun. Bounty hunters, he growled. They must have tracked us here. Martha hustled them toward the house. Get inside. Frank and I will handle this. No, Cassian said firmly. This is my fight. I won't put you in danger. This is our home, Frank argued. We've been handling trouble since before you could lift that fancy gun. Cassian turned to Eliza. Stay inside. No matter what happens, stay inside. Heart pounding, she nodded and hurried into the cabin, watching through the window as Cassian, Frank, and Martha positioned themselves around the property, weapons ready. The riders approached slowly, spreading out to surround the cabin. Their leader, a barrel-chested man with a graying beard, called out, We know you're in there, DeWitt. Come out with the Monroe girl, and maybe we won't kill you, Frank answered from behind a water barrel. This is private property. State your business or ride on. Our business is with DeWitt and the girl he kidnapped, the leader shouted back. $10,000 says they're our business. There's no kidnapped girl here, Martha called from the corner of the house. Just my husband and me, one of the riders pointed toward the corral. That's DeWitt's horse, black with the white blaze. I'd know it anywhere. Last chance, the leader warned. Send them out or we're coming in shooting. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. These men would kill Cassian without a second thought, and possibly Frank and Martha too. All because of her. Before she could think twice, she grabbed her new revolver from the table and stepped onto the porch. I'm Eliza Monroe, she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. And I wasn't kidnapped. Eliza, no! Cassian hissed from his position by the woodpile. The bounty hunters turned their attention to her, weapons raised. Miss Monroe, the leader, said, his tone softening slightly. Your father's worried sick about you. We're here to take you home. I'm not going anywhere, she replied, keeping the revolver lowered but visible. I'm here by choice. The man chuckled. That's not what your daddy says. He says this outlaw bewitched you, made you confused. The only one confused is you, Eliza shot back. Now get off this property before someone gets hurt. The leader's face hardened. I've got orders to bring you back, and him dead or alive. 5 men with guns say I'm doing exactly that. One of the other bounty hunters nudged his horse forward. Look at her, Joe. All cleaned up and proper. Don't look like no hostage to me. Shut up, Pike, the leader, Joe, snapped. $10,000 don't lie. Neither do I, Eliza said firmly. Cassian DeWitt saved my life when bandits attacked our stagecoach. I chose to go with him. Even if that's true, Joe said, your daddy and your fiancé want you home. So that's where you're going, he gestured to 2 of his men. Get her. Everything happened at once. The 2 men spurred their horses forward. Cassian emerged from cover, his silver gun drawn. Frank fired, a warning shot into the air. Martha aimed at the closest rider, and Eliza raised her revolver just as Cassian had taught her and fired. The bullet struck the ground in front of the lead rider's horse, causing it to rear in panic. The rider tumbled from the saddle, landing hard in the dirt. The next one won't miss, Eliza warned, her hands shaking but her aim steady. Joe stared at her in disbelief. You'd shoot at the men trying to rescue you? I don't need rescuing, she replied, and you're not here to save me, you're here for money. Cassian moved to stand beside her on the porch, his silver gun gleaming in the sunlight. You heard the... Lady, time for you to leave. Joe's face contorted with rage. This isn't over, DeWitt. That price on your head just keeps getting higher. Add it to my tab, Cassian replied coldly. The fallen rider scrambled back onto his horse, and the group slowly backed away, keeping their weapons trained on the cabin until they were out of range. When they were finally gone, Eliza's legs gave out. She sank onto the porch steps, the revolver suddenly heavy in her trembling hands. Cassian crouched beside her, gently taking the gun. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen. Probably both, she admitted, her voice shaky. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch surprising her. You could have been killed. So could you. She met his eyes. They came for me, Cassie, and because of me, you're in even more danger now. Frank and Martha joined them on the porch, both looking rattled but unharmed. Those men will be back, Frank said grimly. With more guns next time. Martha nodded in agreement. You can't stay here now, neither of you. Cassian stood, his face set in hard lines. We'll leave at nightfall. Take different trails, make it harder to track us. We? Eliza looked up at him. What happened to sending me to Colorado? His mouth quirked in that half-smile she'd come to recognize. Plans change, Miss Monroe, especially when society girls start shooting at bounty hunters. Despite everything, Eliza felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. Where will we go? Somewhere they won't look for us, he replied. Somewhere we can finish your education. Back in Hollow Creek, Bartholomew, Monroe slammed the telegram onto his desk with enough force to make his inkwell jump. Confronted targets, female subject claimed to be there willingly. Shots fired, withdrawing to reassess, he read aloud, his voice shaking with rage. Incompetent fools. Thomas Blake sat across from him, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and his collar was askew. What does this mean? He asked. Is Eliza truly with him by choice? Monroe waved a dismissive hand. Of course not. She's confused, possibly drugged. DeWitt is manipulating her. But why? What does he want with her? Monroe hesitated, avoiding Thomas's gaze. Revenge, most likely. He blames me for his family's downfall. There's something you're not telling me, Thomas said, leaning forward. What really happened with the DeWitts? Monroe's face darkened. That's ancient history and none of your concern. What matters is getting Eliza back. She's my fiancée. Everything about her is my concern. Thomas's voice hardened uncharacteristically. If there's something that might help us understand why she's with him, I need to know it. Monroe studied the younger man for a moment, then sighed heavily. Very well. The full story, then. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, sliding one across, to Thomas. 12 years ago, Jason DeWitt owned the railroad that connected Hollow Creek to Santa Fe. It was profitable but small. Eastern investors wanted to create a larger line that would connect to Denver and beyond. I remember when the new railroad came, Thomas said. It was just after I started my practice here. Monroe nodded. What you don't know is what happened. Behind the scenes, DeWitt refused to sell his line to the Eastern Consortium, said it was his life's work, his legacy for his sons. Cassian and his brother, Thomas supplied. Yes, stubborn fool. Monroe took a long swallow of whiskey. The consortium approached several local businessmen, myself included, with an opportunity. They needed our support to establish the new line. Loans, land rights, political connections. And, in return, shares in the new company, substantial shares. Monroe's eyes took on a distant look. All we had to do was make sure DeWitt's railroad failed. Thomas stared at him. How did you do that? We raised shipping rates for anyone using his line, denied loans for repairs and improvements, bought the land he needed for expansion. Monroe shrugged. Business tactics, nothing more. That drove him to suicide. DeWitt was weak, Monroe said dismissively. When his railroad failed, he couldn't face his family, shot himself in his office one night. His wife couldn't bear the shame, took to her bed and wasted away. And the sons? The younger one, Robert, I think his name was, got himself killed, trying to defend the last piece of family property from repossession. Cassian disappeared after that. Monroe's face hardened, until he resurfaced a few years later, robbing banks and trains, targeting those of us who had been involved with the consortium. Thomas drained his glass. So now he has Eliza to hurt. You, precisely. Then why hasn't he sent a ransom demand? Why did she tell those bounty hunters she was there willingly? Monroe slammed his glass down. Enough questions. DeWitt has poisoned her mind against me, against you, against everything decent and proper in her life. Or perhaps, Thomas said, quietly, he's told her the truth about what happened to his family. Monroe's face flushed with anger. Whose side are you on, Doctor? Eliza's, Thomas replied simply. Always Eliza's. Then help me get her back, Monroe said, his voice low and dangerous. Because if DeWitt has turned my daughter against me, He'll pay with more than just his life. Thomas stood, straightening his jacket. I'll help find Eliza. What happens after that depends on her. As the doctor left, Monroe poured himself another whiskey. Things were spiraling out of control. If Eliza had learned the truth about his dealings with the DeWitts, if that information became public knowledge, no, he couldn't allow that to happen. He reached for a fresh sheet of paper and began to write. The bounty hunters had failed. It was time to call in professionals, men who wouldn't be deterred by a woman claiming to be there willingly, men who would bring Cassian DeWitt's head back in a bag, and if Eliza resisted, well, a grieving father and a devoted fiancé would surely be forgiven for whatever means they used to rescue a young woman from the clutches of a notorious outlaw. Under cover of darkness, Cassian and Eliza said goodbye to Frank and Martha. The older couple had packed them supplies, food, ammunition, medical necessities, and offered what protection they could in the form of advice. Head for the old mining camp in Blackwater Canyon, Frank suggested. It's abandoned now, but the cabins are still standing. Good place to lie low for a while. Martha pressed a bundle into Eliza's hands. Clean clothes, some personal items. Not much, but better than nothing. Thank you, Eliza said, embracing the older woman. For everything. Martha patted her cheek. You take care of yourself, girl, and him too. She nodded toward Cassian, who was checking their horses. He acts tough, but he's carried that pain alone for too long. Cassian had procured a second horse. For Eliza, a sturdy bay mare with a gentle disposition. Time to see if those riding lessons paid off, he said as he helped her mount. They set off in opposite directions from the cabin, planning to circle around and meet at a predetermined spot. A basic precaution, Cassian explained, to confuse anyone who might be watching. When they reunited an hour later, Eliza felt a surge of relief at seeing him waiting for her in the shadow of a large boulder. You made it, he said, sounding genuinely pleased. Not bad for your first solo night ride. I had a good teacher, she replied. As they rode side by side through the cool desert night, Eliza stole glances at Cassian's profile. In the silver moonlight, with his guard slightly lowered, he looked younger somehow. Less the hardened outlaw and more the man he might have been if tragedy hadn't shaped his path. What are you thinking about? He asked, catching her looking. Eliza decided on honesty, about how different our lives could have been. He was quiet for a moment. Do you regret it? Coming with me? No, she said without hesitation. Do you regret taking me? His eyes found hers in the darkness. No, he said, softly. I don't. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was ready to name, but both could feel growing stronger with each passing day. They rode on toward Blackwater Canyon, two fugitives against the world, drawn together by circumstances neither could have predicted, but neither now wished to change. Behind them, dust rising in the moonlight, a new group of riders followed their trail, men hired not to capture, but to kill. Blackwater Canyon lived up to its name. The abandoned mining camp sat nestled between towering black rock walls, hidden from view until you were almost upon it. A dozen weathered cabins clustered around what had once been the main street, their windows dark and empty, like sightless eyes. It's not exactly the Grand Hotel, Cassian remarked as they rode into the camp at dawn, their horses' hooves eerily loud in the silence. It's perfect, Eliza said, taking in their surroundings with a critical eye. Hard to approach without being seen, multiple escape routes, plenty of shelter. Cassian glanced at her with something like admiration. You're learning fast. I have a good reason to. She dismounted, her body stiff after the long night ride. They chose a cabin near the back of the camp, positioned with a clear view of the canyon entrance. The interior was dusty but intact. A table, chairs, a stone fireplace, and a narrow bed in the corner. Evidence of the miners who had once lived here remained. A forgotten shirt hanging from a peg, a pair of boots beneath the bed, a coffee pot on the hearth. Home sweet home, Cassian said, dropping their supplies on the table, at least for a while. Eliza moved to the window, looking out at the canyon. How long do you think we can stay here? A few days, maybe a week. He joined her at the window, his shoulder brushing hers. Long enough to plan our next move, she turned to face him. And what is our next move? Cassian's expression grew serious. That depends on what you want, Eliza. What I want, yes. His blue eyes searched hers. I can still get you to Colorado. Set you up with a new name, a fresh start. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. He ran a hand through his dark hair. What I want doesn't matter. What matters is keeping you safe. I think what you want matters very much, she countered. And I think it's time you stopped trying to protect me and started being honest with me. Honest about what? About why you really took me from that stagecoach. About what you're planning to do to my father. About... She hesitated. About us. Cassian turned away, moving to unpack their supplies. There's food here. You should eat. Something, then get some rest. Don't do that, she said, frustration edging into her voice. Don't shut me out. I'm trying to keep you alive, Eliza. He spun back to face her, his calm facade cracking. Every day you stay with me puts you in more danger. Your father has men hunting us across the territory. Your fiancé... Thomas is not my fiancé, she interrupted. Not anymore. Does he know that? Cassian challenged. Does your father? Because from where I stand, it looks like the whole territory thinks I've kidnapped you from your perfect life and perfect future husband. Eliza stepped closer to him. My life wasn't perfect, it was a cage. And Thomas... She shook her head. Thomas was chosen for me, not by me. So what? I'm your act of rebellion? Your way of spiting Daddy? His words stung, but Eliza refused to. Back down. Is that what you think? Cassian's expression softened slightly. I don't know what to think. I just know that someone like you doesn't belong with someone like me. Someone like me, she repeated, her voice growing stronger. A banker's daughter, a society girl, a proper lady. She stepped closer still, close enough to feel the warmth of him. Is that all you see when you look at me? No, he admitted softly. That's not all I see. Then tell me what you see. Cassian's eyes held hers, filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. I see someone brave, someone who faced down armed men without flinching, someone who chose a harder path because it was more true. His voice dropped to a near whisper. I see someone I can't afford to care about, but do anyway. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. And that's why you keep trying to send me away. Yes. What? If I don't want to go? He searched her face, looking for doubt or uncertainty and finding none. Eliza. The distant sound of hoofbeats cut through the moment like a knife. Cassian was instantly alert, moving to the window with his gun drawn. Riders, he said grimly. At least 4, maybe more. Eliza joined him at the window, squinting against the morning sun. Bounty hunters. Something worse, he replied, eyes narrowing. Professionals. In the distance, 6 riders approached the canyon entrance, moving with the practiced coordination of men who hunted together often. Unlike the bounty hunters they'd faced at Frank and Martha's, these men wore no bandanas, carried no wanted posters. Their weapons gleamed in the sunlight, expensive rifles and revolvers that spoke of serious money behind their mission. My father, Eliza realized. He hired killers. Cassian nodded. They're not here to take you home, Eliza. They're here to kill me and anyone with me. He grabbed their packs, already prepared for a quick escape. We need to move now. Where? She asked, strapping on her revolver with practiced ease. They're blocking the main entrance. There's another way out, he said, leading her to the back door. Through the old mining tunnels. Frank told me about them. They slipped out the back of the cabin, keeping to the shadows as they made their way to the far end of the camp. Behind them, they could hear the riders entering the main street, spreading out to search the cabins. There, Cassian pointed to a dark opening in the canyon wall, partially hidden by fallen rocks. That's our way out. As they reached the mine, entrance, a shout rang out behind them. There they are, gunfire erupted, bullets kicking up dust at their feet. Cassian pushed Eliza into the tunnel entrance, then turned and fired 2 quick shots from his silver revolver. One of the pursuers, fell from his horse with a cry. "Go," he ordered, backing into the tunnel after her. "Keep moving." The tunnel was dark and narrow, forcing them to move in single file. Cassian produced a small lantern from his pack, casting just enough light to avoid the worst obstacles. The air grew thick with dust and the lingering scent of old dynamite. "How far does this go?" Eliza asked, her voice echoing strangely. "According to Frank, it comes out on the other side of the ridge," Cassian replied. "About a mile." Behind them, they could hear voices as their pursuers found the tunnel entrance. More gunshots rang out, bullets ricocheting off the rock walls. "They're desperate," Cassian remarked grimly, "firing blindly in a tunnel full of old dynamite." "Dynamite?" Eliza's eyes widened in the dim light. "Don't worry," he assured her. "Most of it was used up years ago." "Most of it?" Cassian's half-smile appeared briefly. "Well, not all of it." They hurried deeper into the tunnel, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter. The passage twisted and turned, occasionally branching into smaller tunnels that disappeared into darkness. "Stay on the main path," Cassian warned. "The side tunnels are dead ends or worse." After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, the tunnel began to slope upward. Fresh air trickled in, a welcome relief from the stale underground atmosphere. "We're getting close," Cassian said, relief evident in his voice. Just as the tunnel exit came into view, a bright circle of daylight ahead, a deafening explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. "What was that?" Eliza gasped, steadying herself against the wall. "Dynamite," Cassian replied grimly. "They're trying to collapse the tunnel." Another explosion, closer this time. The walls shuddered, ominously. "Run!" Cassian grabbed her hand, and they sprinted toward the exit as the tunnel began to cave in behind them. They burst into daylight just as a third explosion sent a cloud of dust billowing out of the tunnel entrance. Coughing and covered in dirt, they stumbled away from the now partially collapsed mine. "That was close," Eliza managed between coughs. "Too close," Cassian agreed, scanning their surroundings. They were on the far side of the ridge, in a small valley dotted with scrub brush. "They'll be coming around the long way now. We need to find the horses." "Horses?" he nodded. "Frank said there's an old corral on this side where the miners kept spare mounts. If we're lucky, our friends back there didn't find it first. Fortune was with them. The corral was where Frank had described, tucked away in a small box canyon, and inside were 4 horses, trail-worn but serviceable. Not as nice as the ones we left behind," Cassian commented as he quickly checked their condition, "but they'll have to do." He helped Eliza mount one of the horses, a sturdy brown gelding, then swung up onto another himself. "We'll head west," he said. "There's a town called Redemption about 30 miles from here. Not much more than a saloon and a general store, but the people there don't ask questions." As they rode, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers, Eliza found herself studying Cassian's profile. Despite the danger, despite the dust and exhaustion, he maintained a calm determination that she had come to admire deeply. "You saved my life again," she said, as they paused to water the horses at a small stream. "You'd have made it out of that tunnel without me," he replied, splashing water on his face to clear away the dust. "Maybe." She dismounted to stretch her legs. "But I wouldn't have known about it in the first place." He straightened, water dripping from his face. "Is that what this is about? Keeping score of who saved who?" "No." She stepped closer to him. "It's about understanding why you keep risking your life for me when you're so determined to send me away." Cassian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Eliza." "Then uncomplicate it." She held his gaze, refusing to back down. "Tell me the truth." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "Your father didn't just ruin my family, Eliza. He destroyed everything good in my life." "I know about the railroad," she said. "About what happened to your father and mother and brother." "Do you?" His voice hardened. "Do you know that your father watched my father beg for an extension on his loan? That he laughed when my father said it would destroy our family? Do you know that when my brother Robert tried to defend our home, it was your father's men who shot him? Not in self-defense, but in cold blood, while he stood on our porch with empty hands." Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. "No, I didn't know that." Your father built his fortune on the backs of people like my family, Cassian continued. Honest people who worked hard, who played by the rules, who believed in something better than greed. I'm sorry, she whispered, though she knew the words were inadequate. It's not your fault, he said, his voice softening. You didn't know. But I'm still his daughter. Cassian looked at her for a long moment. Yes, you are. He mounted his horse again. We should keep moving. Eliza followed suit, her mind racing. What were you planning to do? Before you met me, what was your plan for my father? He didn't answer immediately, guiding his horse back to the trail. Finally, he said, I was going to expose him. I've spent years gathering evidence against him and the others involved in the railroad scheme. Proof of bribes, fraudulent contracts, even the order to kill my brother. And now? Now? He glanced back at her. Now I'm not sure. Because whatever I do to your father affects you too. They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The terrain changed as they headed west, the rocky ridges giving way to open desert dotted with sagebrush and cactus. The sun beat down mercilessly, but Eliza barely noticed the heat. Her mind was too full of what Cassian had told her, and what he hadn't. My father is a monster, she finally said. Cassian reined in his horse, turning to face her. Eliza, no. Let me finish. She held up a hand. If what you say is true, and I believe it is, then my father is a monster, and I've been living with that monster, benefiting from his crimes, my entire life. She took a deep breath. I want to help you stop him. Surprise flickered across his face. You'd go against your own father? I'd go against anyone who did the things he's done, she replied firmly. Blood doesn't excuse cruelty or greed or murder. Something like admiration lit Cassian's eyes. It won't be easy. Your father is a powerful man with powerful friends. So are you, she countered, in different ways. A smile, a real one, not the half smile she was used to, spread across his face. Yes, I suppose I am. For the first time in days, Eliza felt a sense of purpose, of rightness. So what's the plan? Cassian's expression grew serious again. First, we need to get to redemption. Rest, resupply. Then we need to retrieve something I've kept hidden, the evidence against your father and his associates. And then? Then we go to Hollow Creek, he said, determination in his voice, and we bring the truth to light. By the time they reached redemption, the sun was setting, painting the small cluster of buildings in shades of gold and crimson. As Cassian had described, the town wasn't much, a saloon, a general store, a livery stable, and a handful of small houses. But to Eliza's exhausted eyes, it looked like paradise. They left their horses at the stable and made their way to the saloon, which appeared to be the center of activity in the tiny settlement. Inside, a few rough-looking men nursed drinks at scattered tables, while a piano player half-heartedly plunked out a tune in the corner. Conversations paused briefly as they entered, curious eyes taking in the dust-covered pair. Cassian led Eliza to a table in the back corner, positioning himself so he could see both the main entrance and the back door. Wait here, he said. I need to find someone. As he approached the bar, Eliza watched the other patrons return to their drinks and conversations. No one seemed to recognize either of them, which was a relief. Perhaps news of the banker's daughter and the notorious outlaw hadn't reached this remote outpost yet. A young woman in a faded dress approached the table. Can I get you something, miss? Water, please, Eliza replied, and whatever food you might have. The woman nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with a glass of water and a promise of stew. Across the room, Cassian was deep in conversation with the bartender, their heads bent close together. When the stew arrived, a simple but fragrant mixture of beef, potatoes, and beans, Eliza realized how hungry she was. She was halfway through the bowl when Cassian returned to the table, accompanied by a weathered old man with a silver beard. Eliza, this is Jacob, Cassian said. An old friend. Jacob's eyes crinkled as he smiled. Any friend of Cassian's is a friend of mine. He glanced between them. Though I suspect you're more than just a friend, young lady. Eliza felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm Eliza. Just Eliza. Jacob raised an eyebrow. For now, she replied. The old man chuckled. Smart girl. He turned to Cassian. I've got a room above the store. Not much, but it's clean and the door locks. You're welcome to it for as long as you need. Thank you, Jacob, Cassian said. We won't be staying long, just tonight, maybe tomorrow. Long enough to retrieve your package? Jacob asked knowingly. Cassian nodded. Long enough for that. After Jacob left, Eliza leaned forward. What package? The evidence, Cassian replied quietly. I left it with Jacob for safekeeping. Letters, contracts, witness statements, everything needed to prove what your father and his associates did. And once we have it, then we go to Hollow Creek, Himi said. But not just the two of us, we'll need help. Eliza considered this. Frank and Martha? They're part of it, Cassian confirmed. But we'll need more. Jacob will send word to others. People who've been hurt by your father. People who have reason to want justice. The idea both frightened and exhilarated Eliza. A small army. Something like that. He studied her face. Are you sure about this, Eliza? Once we do this, there's no going back. Your father will go to prison. The life you knew will be gone forever. That life was built on lies and other people's suffering, she said firmly. I don't want it anymore. Cassian reached across the table, taking her hand in his. You are an extraordinary woman, Eliza Monroe. The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading through her. I'm just doing what's right. Most people don't, he said softly. That's what makes it extraordinary. They finished their meal in companionable silence, the weight of their decision settling around them like a comfortable blanket. When they finally left the saloon, night had fully fallen, the small town quiet except for the muffled sounds from the saloon. Jacob was waiting for them at the general store, a lantern in hand. This way, he said, leading them up a narrow staircase at the back of the building. The room above the store was small, but as promised, clean. A single bed occupied most of the space, with a washstand in the corner and a small window overlooking the main street. There's water in the pitcher, Jacob said. Outhouse is out back. I'll bring the package in the morning. He hesitated at the door. Good to see you again, Cassian. Your father would be proud of the man you've become. After Jacob left, an awkward silence fell between them. The single bed loomed large in the small room. I'll take the floor, Cassian said quickly. Don't be ridiculous, Eliza replied. We've been riding for days. You need proper rest as much as I do. She gestured to the bed. Here it's big enough for both of us. He looked uncertain. Eliza, I trust you, Cassian, she said simply. You told me once that you've never touched a woman who didn't ask you to. I believe that. He searched her face, then nodded. All right. They took turns at the washstand, Cassian gentlemanly turning his back while Eliza cleaned away the trail dust as best she could. When they finally lay down, they kept a careful distance between them, both acutely aware of the other's presence. Cassian? Eliza whispered into the darkness. Yes? What happens after? After we expose my father? After justice is done? What then? He was quiet for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he said, I don't know. I've spent so many years focused on bringing your father to justice, I never really thought about what comes after. What would you want, if you could have anything? Again, a long pause. Peace, maybe. A place where the past doesn't haunt me. A life where I'm not always looking over my shoulder. His voice softened. Someone to share it with. Eliza's heart quickened. That sounds nice. What about you? He asked. What would you want? She turned onto her side, facing him in the darkness, though she could barely make out his features. Freedom. Not just from my father or Hollow Creek, but the freedom to choose my own path. To be who I really am, not who someone else wants me to be. And who is that? The real Eliza Monroe? She smiled, though he couldn't see it. I'm still figuring that out, but I think she's someone who doesn't run from danger, someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard, someone who isn't afraid to feel. His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. I like her. The real Eliza Monroe. I like the real Cassian DeWitt too, she whispered back. Not the outlaw everyone fears, but the man who saves stagecoach passengers and protects his friends and fights for justice. They fell silent, hands still joined between them, the connection saying more than words could. Eventually, Eliza's breathing deepened as sleep claimed her, the exhaustion of their journey finally catching up. Cassian lay awake longer, watching the moonlight create patterns on the ceiling, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond revenge, a future that impossibly included the woman sleeping beside him. The next morning brought Jacob with the promised package, a leather satchel, weather-beaten, and nondescript. Inside were papers, carefully preserved and organized, ledgers showing suspicious transactions, letters between conspirators discussing their plans, sworn statements from witnesses to the events surrounding Robert DeWitt's death. "It's all here," Cassian said, satisfaction in his voice. "Everything we need." Jacob had brought news as well. "Word spreading," he told them. "Frank and Martha are gathering people. They'll meet you at the old Johnson Ranch, 10 miles outside." "Hollow Creek. How many?" Cassian asked. 15, maybe 20, Jacob replied. "Good people, all of them. People with reason to want Bartholomew Monroe brought to justice." Eliza examined one of the ledgers. "My father's signature," she said quietly, tracing the familiar scrawl. "And Thomas's too." She looked up in surprise. "My fiancé was involved in this?" "The doctor?" Jacob asked. Cassian nodded grimly. "Thomas Blake. He came to Hollow Creek right around the time the railroad deal was happening." "He was my father's physician before he was my fiancé," Eliza said, the pieces falling into place. "That's how we met." "The Blakes were investors in the Eastern Consortium," Cassian explained. "Thomas was sent to Hollow Creek to help manage their interests and to keep an eye on your father." Eliza felt sick. "So my entire engagement was just another business arrangement?" "I'm sorry," Cassian said, genuine regret in his voice. She squared her shoulders. "Don't be. It just gives me one more reason to see this through." They spent the morning reviewing the evidence, planning their approach. By midday, they were ready to depart. "You'll need these," Jacob said, presenting them with fresh clothes. For Cassian, a clean black shirt and pants, not unlike what he usually wore. For Eliza, a surprise, men's riding clothes, practical and durable. "I thought you might be tired of riding in dresses," Jacob explained with a twinkle in his eye. Eliza accepted the clothes gratefully. "Thank you." When she emerged from behind the screen where she'd changed, both men stared. The trousers and shirt fit her surprisingly well, transforming her from a banker's daughter into something else entirely. A woman in command of her own destiny. "Well," she asked, turning in a circle, "will I do?" Cassian's eyes darkened with something she hadn't seen before. "You'll more than do." They said their goodbyes to Jacob, promising to send word when it was all over. With the precious satchel of evidence secured, they mounted fresh horses provided by the old man and set off toward Hollow Creek. As they rode side by side, Eliza felt a new confidence filling her. The clothes were part of it, the freedom of movement, the practicality. But it was more than that. For the first time in her life, she was making her own choices, fighting her own battles. "What are you thinking?" Cassian asked, noticing her smile. "That I'm not the same woman who sat in that stagecoach 2 weeks ago," she replied. "And I'm glad." He studied her, admiration plain in his eyes. "So am I." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a soothing backdrop to their thoughts. The landscape grew more familiar as they approached Hollow Creek territory, rolling hills giving way to cattle country, fence lines marking property boundaries. As they made camp that night, beneath a sky scattered with stars, Eliza felt a strange mix of emotions. They were drawing closer to confrontation, to danger, to an uncertain future, yet she felt calmer than she had in years. "Cassian," she said, watching him tend the small fire. "There's something I need to tell you." He looked up, his face half illuminated by the flames. "What is it?" She moved to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "If something happens tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever we finally face my father, I want you to know that I don't regret any of it. Not one moment since I took your hand that day." His expression softened. "Eliza, "Let me finish," she said gently. "You told me once that you never touch a woman who doesn't ask you to." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "What if I'm asking now?" Cassian's eyes darkened, but he didn't move. "Are you sure?" In answer, Eliza leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as years of restraint and loneliness gave way to newfound passion. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Cassian's hand came up to cup her cheek. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you sitting in that stagecoach, refusing to be afraid." "Why didn't you?" she asked, leaning into his touch. "Because you deserved better than an outlaw on the run," he said. "You still do. I deserve to choose for myself," she replied. "And I choose you, Cassian DeWitt. Whatever comes next, I choose you." As the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, they found in each other what they'd both been searching for. Not just passion, but understanding, acceptance, the freedom to be themselves, without pretense or fear. In the heart of enemy territory, with danger closing in from all sides, they found a moment of perfect peace in each other's arms. Thomas Blake stood at the window of his office, watching the streets of Hollow Creek with troubled eyes. Something was coming. He could feel it in the air, in the whispers that stopped when he entered a room, in the way Bartholomew Monroe had been calling emergency meetings with the town's most powerful men. A knock at the door roused him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called. A young boy entered, hat in hand. "Message for you, Doc." Thomas took the folded paper, tipping the boy before sending him on his way. The note was brief, unsigned, but he recognized the handwriting immediately. "She's coming home," it read, "with the truth." He crumpled the paper in his fist, heart racing. Eliza was alive. Coming home, with the truth, and he had a decision to make. The Johnson Ranch sat abandoned on the outskirts of Hollow Creek territory, a testament to another family destroyed by Bartholomew Monroe's greed. Once fertile grazing land, now lay fallow, the main house a shadow of its former glory. But today the old barn behind the house buzzed with activity as people gathered from across the territory. Cassian and Eliza arrived just after sunset, approaching cautiously until Frank's familiar figure stepped out to greet them. "Wasn't sure you'd make it," the older man said, embracing Cassian warmly before turning to Eliza with surprise in his eyes. "Well, look at you. Hardly recognize the society girl I met a week ago." Eliza smiled, conscious of her new appearance in men's riding clothes, her blonde hair braided and tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "A lot has changed in a week." "So I see." Frank's eyes flicked between her and Cassian, noting their easy closeness. "Martha's inside. She'll be glad to see you both." The barn had been transformed into a makeshift meeting hall. Lanterns hung from the rafters, illuminating the faces of nearly 20 men and women seated on hay bales and wooden crates. A murmur went through the crowd as Cassian entered with Eliza at his side. "Is that Monroe's daughter?" someone whispered loudly. "What's she doing here?" another demanded. Martha pushed through the crowd to embrace them both. "Don't mind them," she said to Eliza. "They'll understand soon enough." Cassian moved to the center of the barn, commanding attention without raising his voice. "Thank you all for coming. I know many of you have traveled far and risked much to be here." "We came for justice, DeWitt," called a weathered rancher. "You promised us proof against Monroe and his cronies." Cassian lifted the leather satchel. "It's all here, everything we need to bring them down." He began laying out papers on a makeshift table, ledgers, letters, sworn statements. "Bartholomew Monroe and his associates didn't just ruin my family," he explained. "They've been systematically destroying anyone who stands in their way for years." The crowd gathered closer, examining the evidence with growing anger. Names were recognized, connections made, old wounds reopened. "My farm," said one woman, pointing to a document. "This shows they diverted the creek deliberately, then called in my loan when the crops failed." "And here," an elderly man added, "proof they bribed the territorial judge to rule against the smallholders in the water rights case." As the evidence mounted, so did the outrage. Years of suspicion were finally confirmed in black and white, a pattern of corruption, greed, and occasional murder that had shaped the territory for over a decade. Throughout it all, Eliza stood beside Cassian, her face pale but determined. When one man asked why Monroe's daughter was present, she stepped forward. "I didn't know," she said simply. "I didn't know what my father was doing, but now I do, and I want justice as much as any of you." Her sincerity silenced the doubters. One by one, they nodded in acceptance. With the evidence laid bare, Cassian outlined his plan. "Tomorrow is the town meeting. Every important man in Hollow Creek will be there, including Monroe and his inner circle. We'll confront them publicly, with witnesses and evidence. The territorial marshal is already on his way, a good man who can't be bought." "And if they resist?" someone asked. Cassian's hand rested on his silver gun. "Then we'll be ready for that too." As the meeting broke up, people drifting off to prepare for the next day, Eliza found herself approached by a woman about her own age. Her face was vaguely familiar. "You don't remember me, do you?" the woman asked without rancor. "Sarah Johnson. This was my family's ranch." Eliza shook her head. "I'm sorry, I don't. We were in school together for a time, before my father died, and my mother had to send me to live with relatives." Sarah gestured to the barn around them. "Your father took all this after driving my father to suicide, just like he did to Cassian's father." Eliza felt the familiar shame washing over her. "I'm truly sorry for what my father did to your family." Sarah studied her for a moment. "You really didn't know, did you?" "No. I lived in a bubble of privilege, never questioning where it came from." Eliza met the other woman's gaze directly. "But I'm here now, trying to make it right." Something softened in Sarah's expression. "That takes courage, standing against your own father." "Less courage than you might think," Eliza replied. "Once you see the truth, there's no going back." Later, as they prepared for sleep in one of the ranch's outbuildings, Cassian found Eliza sitting alone, lost in thought. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly, settling beside her. She shook her head. "No, just processing. All those people, all those lives destroyed, and I never saw any of it." "You weren't meant to see it," he said. "Monroe kept you isolated, protected from the uglier parts of his business." "But I should have known," she insisted. "There were signs if I'd been willing to look." Cassian took her hand. "We all have blind spots when it comes to family. It's not your fault, Eliza." She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Tomorrow everything changes." "Yes," he agreed, "for all of us." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each contemplating the day ahead. "Are you afraid?" she finally asked. He considered the question seriously. "Not of facing your father, not even of what might happen if things go wrong." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes intense in the lamplight. "But of what comes after, of having to figure out who Cassian DeWitt is when he's not chasing revenge." "That terrifies me." Eliza squeezed his hand. "You won't have to figure it out alone." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "No, I suppose I won't." Dawn broke clear and crisp over Hollow Creek. The town was already stirring. Merchants setting up their wares, the saloon preparing for a busy day. The monthly town meeting would bring ranchers and farmers from miles around, filling the streets with horses and wagons. In the sheriff's office, Thomas Blake sat across from Sheriff Williams, his expression grave. "You're certain of this information?" Say. Sheriff nodded. "Got word from a reliable source. DeWitt and his people are planning something today, something big." "And Eliza?" "She's with him, by all accounts." Thomas rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Have you told Monroe?" "Not yet. Thought you might want to be the one, seeing as you're engaged to his daughter." "Yes," Thomas said distantly, "his daughter." After the sheriff left to make his rounds, Thomas remained seated, the unsigned note from the previous day burning a hole in his pocket. "She's coming home with the truth." He had a decision to make and not much time to make it. The town hall was packed by midday. Every important citizen of Hollow Creek occupied the front rows. Bankers, merchants, ranchers, with large holdings. Bartholomew Monroe sat in his customary place at the center, his imposing figure commanding respect despite his 60 years. Beside him sat Thomas Blake, unusually quiet. Sheriff Williams stood near the door, eyeing the crowd with suspicion. Something felt off today. Too many unfamiliar faces, too many sidelong glances. At precisely noon, Mayor Wilkins called the meeting to order. First item of business. The doors of the town hall burst open. Cassian DeWitt strode in, silver gun gleaming at his hip, Eliza at his side. Behind them came 20 men and women, their faces set with determination. A gasp went through the crowd. Sheriff Williams reached for his gun but found himself facing Frank and 2 other armed men. "Easy, Sheriff," Frank warned. "This is official business." "Cassian DeWitt," Monroe thundered, rising to his feet. "You dare show your face in this town after kidnapping my daughter?" "I wasn't kidnapped, Father," Eliza said clearly, her voice carrying through the suddenly silent hall. "I went with Cassian willingly, and now I've returned with evidence of your crimes." Monroe's face purpled with rage. "What nonsense is this?" "Sheriff, arrest this man." "The sheriff isn't going anywhere," Cassian replied calmly. "And neither are you, Monroe. Not until the people of Hollow Creek hear the truth." He stepped forward, the leather satchel in his hands. "For years, Bartholomew Monroe and his associates have been systematically destroying lives for profit. They've manipulated markets, stolen land, ruined families, and occasionally committed murder to cover their tracks." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Monroe sputtered in outrage. "Preposterous! This man is an outlaw with a personal vendetta against me." "It's not just him," Sarah Johnson stepped forward. "My father owned this land before you drove him to suicide and stole it from my mother." Others joined in, one after another, each with a story of ruination at Monroe's hands. With each testimony, Cassian produced documents from the satchel, proof of Monroe's misdeeds signed in his own hand. "This is slander," Monroe shouted, looking to his associates for support. But they were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, some already edging toward the exits. "It's not slander if it's true," Cassian replied, "and we have proof of all of it, including—" He pulled out a final document. "The order to kill my brother Robert, signed by you, Monroe." Gasps echoed through the hall. Monroe's face went from purple to ashen. "Lies," he whispered, but the force had gone out of his denial. "The Territorial Marshal is on his way," Cassian continued. "He'll be very interested in these documents, as will the federal authorities." Monroe's eyes darted around wildly, looking for an escape route, for allies, for any way out. His gaze fell on Thomas. "Blake, do something!" All eyes turned to the doctor, who had remained seated throughout the confrontation. Slowly, Thomas rose to his feet. "Mr. Monroe," he said formally, "I've been aware of your business practices for some time. My family's investment firm sent me here specifically to monitor our interests in your ventures." "Then help me stop this," Monroe demanded. Thomas shook his head. "I can't do that, not anymore." He turned to face Eliza. "When I first came to Hollow Creek, I was just following orders. Get close to Monroe, report on his activities, protect our investment. But then I met you." His eyes softened. "And for the first time, I wanted something more than wealth or power. I wanted a life with you." Eliza's expression remained neutral. "Yet you never told me the truth about my father." "I convinced myself you were better off not knowing," Thomas admitted, "that I was protecting you." He glanced at Cassian. "But it seems someone else had the courage I lacked." He reached into his pocket and produced a small notebook. "I've kept records of my own. Dates, transactions, conversations. Things your father never knew I documented." He held it out to Cassian. "It's yours. Use it." Monroe's face contorted with fury. "Traitor! All of you traitors!" In a desperate move, he lunged for the sheriff's unattended gun, grabbing it and swinging wildly toward Cassian. "I'll see you dead before I let you ruin me." Several things happened at once. Eliza screamed a warning. Cassian reached for his silver revolver, and Thomas Blake threw himself between Monroe and his target. The shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Thomas stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped between his fingers. Monroe raised the gun for a second shot, but before he could fire, Cassian's silver revolver flashed. Monroe's gun went flying, along with 2 of his fingers. Chaos erupted. People scrambled for the exits as Monroe howled in pain and rage. Frank and his men moved swiftly to secure the banker and his closest associates, while Martha rushed to Thomas's side. "It's not deep," she announced after examining the wound. "He'll live." Eliza knelt beside her former fiancé. "Why?" she asked simply. Thomas managed a pained smile. "Perhaps I wanted to be the hero for once, or perhaps I just wanted to do the right thing, finally." Outside, hoofbeats announced new arrivals, the territorial marshal and his deputies right on schedule. "Perfect timing," Cassian remarked dryly as the lawman entered the hall. The marshal surveyed the scene, the wounded doctor, the bleeding banker, the scattered papers, and the armed citizens keeping watch over the town's elite. "DeWitt," he nodded, in recognition. "I see you started without me." "Couldn't be helped," Cassian replied. "Monroe was getting jumpy." The marshal signaled his deputies to take charge of the prisoners. "You have the evidence we discussed?" Cassian handed over the satchel and Thomas's notebook. "All here. Signed confessions would be nice, but I doubt they're feeling cooperative." "They'll talk," the marshal said confidently. "Men like Monroe always do when facing the gallows. As you..." The deputies led Monroe and his associates away. The banker locked eyes with his daughter one last time. "Eliza," he called out, his voice breaking. "How could you do this to your own father?" She met his gaze steadily. "How could you do what you did to so many others, father? To the DeWitts, the Johnsons, and all the rest?" "Everything I did. For you," he insisted. "To give you the life you deserved." "No," she replied quietly. "You did it for yourself. And now you'll answer for it." As Monroe was led away, his face crumpled, finally confronted with the reality of his situation. The mighty banker of Hollow Creek, reduced to a common criminal. The town hall slowly emptied, stunned citizens dispersing to spread the news of what had transpired. Thomas was taken to his office to have his wound properly treated, escorted by Martha and several others. Eliza found herself standing in the center of the hall, suddenly uncertain. The confrontation she had been preparing for was over. Justice had been set in motion. What now? As if reading her thoughts, Cassian appeared at her side. "It's done," he said simply. "Not quite," she replied. "There will be trials, testimony." He nodded. "Yes, but the truth is out now. It can't be buried again." She studied his face, searching for signs of the relief or satisfaction she expected. Instead, she found something else, a calmness she hadn't seen before, as if a great weight had been lifted. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Getting justice for your family after all this time?" "Different than I expected," he admitted. "For so long this moment was all I could think about. Now that it's here," he shrugged, "I find myself thinking more about tomorrow than yesterday." A commotion outside drew their attention. From the doorway, they could see smoke rising from the direction of the bank. "Fire!" someone shouted. "The bank's on fire!" They rushed outside to find flames engulfing the Hollow Creek Bank. Citizens formed a bucket brigade, but it was clearly too late. The building was consumed, important papers flying out the broken windows like fiery birds. "Who did this?" The sheriff demanded, looking accusingly at Cassian's group. Sarah Johnson stepped forward. "I did." She held up a burning ledger. "These records destroyed my family. Seemed fitting they should burn." More fires broke out across town. The land office, the courthouse, Monroe's mansion on the hill. Not wild, destructive blazes, but targeted, controlled burns of the places that had housed corruption for so long. "This wasn't part of the plan," Cassian said to Frank, who watched the fires with grim satisfaction. "Plans change," the older man replied. "Some folks needed this. A cleansing." As smoke billowed into the afternoon sky, Eliza felt a strange sense of rightness. The Hollow Creek she had known was burning away, making room for something new, something better, to rise from the ashes. "We should go," Cassian said quietly. "The marshal can handle things from here." "Go where?" she asked. He smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Anywhere, everywhere, wherever you want." "What about your name?" "You're still wanted in other territories. The marshal has promised to help clear that up in exchange for my testimony against your father and the others." He took her hand. "For the first time in years, I'm a free man, Eliza. Free to go where I want. free to be who I want. And who is that? She asked. Who is Cassian DeWitt when he's not seeking revenge? He considered the question. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I'd like to find out. His eyes held hers. With you, if you're willing. Eliza looked back at the town she had grown up in. The bank where her father had built his corrupt empire was now a burning shell. The society that had constrained her was in disarray. The future stretched before her, unmarked and full of possibility. Yes, she said simply. I'm willing. They retrieved their horses from the livery stable and packed what few possessions they had. As the sun began to set, they rode to the edge of town, where Frank, Martha, and several others waited to say goodbye. What will you do now? Martha asked, embracing Eliza warmly. Live, she replied. Really live for the first time. Frank clasped Cassian's hand. Your father would be proud of you, son. Your mother and brother, too. I hope so, Cassian said, emotion thickening his voice. Thank you for everything, Frank. You and Martha. You saved me when I had nothing left. And now? Frank asked with a knowing smile. Cassian's eyes found Eliza. Now I have everything. As they prepared to ride out, Thomas appeared, his arm in a sling. He approached Eliza cautiously. I'm sorry, he said simply, for not being the man you deserved. Eliza regarded him thoughtfully. You made the right choice in the end, Thomas. That counts for something. Will you ever come back to Hollow Creek, he asked. She glanced at the smoke still rising from the town. Perhaps, someday, when it's a different place. Thomas nodded in understanding. Safe travels, Eliza. He turned to Cassian. Take care of her. She takes care of herself, Cassian replied with a hint of pride, but I'll watch her back, and she'll watch mine. With final goodbyes said, they mounted their horses. Cassian reached into his saddlebag and produced a cigar, lighting it with deliberate care. As they rode away, Eliza looked back one last time at Hollow Creek, the town of her birth now partially obscured by smoke. You think they'll ever forget what we did? She asked. Cassian drew on his cigar, his eyes on the horizon stretching before them. No, but they'll sure as hell remember your name first. She grinned, feeling freer than she ever had in her life. Then she reached for his hand. Together they rode into the sunset, leaving behind the ashes of the past and heading toward a future they would build together. Not as the banker's daughter and the outlaw, but as Eliza and Cassian, writing their own story with every mile. The silver gun still gleamed at his hip, but it was no longer the most precious thing he carried. And though she still had her father's eyes and hair, Eliza Monroe was now, finally and completely, her own woman. Behind them, Hollow Creek burned and rebuilt. Ahead, the open land called with endless possibility. And between them, something rare and beautiful had grown from the unlikeliest of beginnings. A love born of justice, courage, and the freedom to choose one's own path. The end.